Welcome to our tutorial about dimension association. In AutoCAD, we can have three types of dimension associations: associative dimensions, non-associative dimensions, and exploded dimensions. To set dimension associations, we use the dimension association command. Dim ASSOC. Press Enter. Now AutoCAD prompts us for the value. We've got three options: 0, 1, or 2. 0 is an exploded dimension. 1 represents a non-associative dimension. And 2 represents an associative dimension. Let's try the associative dimension first. Enter 2 and press Enter. Now let's place some dimensions on our geometry. I'm going to create a dimension layer. I'll name it DIM. Make it red in color. And let's click OK and close. Let's actually make it the current layer and then close. Now let's go to the Annotate tab. Activate the Dimension tool, Linear. Snap Mode is active. Let's dimension the endpoints of the first line here. And we'll make the text a little bit bigger. Let's say 0.7. OK, and close. Now let's select this dimension. Right here under General, we see the associative property listed at Yes. Let's press Escape to deselect everything. Now if I select a line and drag all the points, my dimension follows and the dimension value changes. Hence the name associative dimension. Let's press Escape to deselect everything. Let's take a look at the next type of dimension, non-associative. Right-click, Recent Input, Dim ASSOC. Let's enter a value of 1. That's the non-associative value. Press Enter. And let's place another linear dimension. We're on the Annotate tab. Activate the Linear Dimension command. Here I can select 3 different points. Let me zoom in to show you what I'm talking about. These 2 lines are coincident at this point. But if I'm not careful, I can select the dimension line by mistake, without even noticing that I did so. And of course, if I do that, the dimension that I'll end up with is the vertical distance between the vertex and the dimension line. So that's something to be careful of when you're making your selections. All right, I've zoomed out. Let me select the endpoints of the line. Place my dimension about here. By the way, if I want to align the dimension, I can select this point as well. Here's an example of the mistake I spoke of a moment ago. I carelessly selected the wrong snap. Let's select this dimension. Under General, the associative property is listed at No. Let's press Escape to deselect everything. Now if I select this line, I can drag it around. However, the dimension stays in its original place. Generally speaking, a non-associative dimension is not good CAD practice. You are better off using associative dimensions. This makes annotating your work much easier, especially in the beginning. Okay, let's place a few more lines on our geometry. Right-click and Enter to close the tool. And let's change the layer of this line. And I'll create one more non-associative dimension. Let's place it here. Oops, I keep forgetting to change the layer. Good thing it's easy to switch layers. Okay, let's move our dimension to the dimension layer. We're going to use this dimension in just a couple seconds. Let's right-click, Recent Input, Now let's learn about the exploded dimension type, which is represented by the value of 0. Type in 0 and press Enter. Let's go to the Annotate tab. Dimension. Now watch what happens. Normally, I just left-click to place the dimension, but when you have an exploded dimension, you've got one more step. I need to enter a value, let's say 10, and then I press Enter. Notice what happens. I'm basically able to input a random text value here. I'll select this segment. Notice I didn't select the entire dimension. It doesn't act like a single entity. It's actually a collection of single lines and text. Let's check out the properties. The drop-down menu here tells us that this is actually a simple line, not a dimension. Using an exploded type of dimension is usually not a good idea. I can simply move these lines as separate entities. Let's press Escape to deselect everything. As you remember, we've got two non-associative dimensions here. Let's see how we can reassociate them. The Reassociate Dimensions command can be accessed from the Dimension menu on the main menu strip. We can also go to the Dimension panel. The Reassociate command is right here. Now we've got the option to select a dimension or to select all non-associative dimensions. For this example, I'm going to select all dimensions. I'll right-click when the selection is finished. The blue X indicates the point of the dimension being reassociated. By the way, a blue X standing alone indicates a non-associative dimension. A blue X that's inside a square indicates an associative dimension. To reassociate dimensions, I simply choose the point of reassociation with a left click. And the blue X will move to the next point. Let's make my selection. Let's test out the association by adjusting the line a bit, and the dimension is modified to match the length of the line. Let's press Escape. Let's take a look at the Properties panel. Now the associative property is listed at Yes. Let's escape to deselect everything. Activate the Reassociate tool again. I'll select this dimension now. As you remember, we created this dimension as associated. Enter. Now right-click. Notice we have an X inside a blue square. And let's make our selection of points for reassociation. And this point here. And the dimension adjusts accordingly. Let's use one more example. Reassociate. Now let's right-click and select Disassociated. Or I can just type D and press Enter. Since we only have one disassociated dimension, it becomes selected. I'll select this point and this point. And once again, let's adjust one of the handles of the line. The dimension follows accordingly. Of course, we can still reposition the dimension. I'll grab this point and position it right here, for example. The dimension follows along. This concludes our lesson about dimension association.